Hey everyone, welcome back to this mini-series on drum mixing. In the past videos, we've covered phase, gain, EQ, and compression, and this one's going to cover everything to do with gating. If you haven't already, make sure you check out the previous videos because this video covers topics that were built on in previous videos. Also, if you haven't already, make sure you like and subscribe. Okay, next we're going to put some gates on the close mics. So we're going to use the good old Logic noise gate. And I guess I'll start with the kick since it didn't put it on everything, and I'll copy it over. If you're not familiar with a gate, it essentially lets you set a decibel level, and when that decibel level is exceeded, it will let the sound come through. And then if the sound is below that decibel level, it will be reduced by a certain amount. That's represented right here. So the threshold is your decibel level. If the sound is above this decibel level, it's going to come through at full volume. If it's below this decibel level, it's going to be reduced by this reduction amount. The hysteresis is basically when the sound goes above the threshold, it's going to open. When the sound goes back below the threshold, it's not going to close until it reaches this hysteresis level. So in other words, the sound has to be 3 decibels lower than this threshold to close. If this freaks you out, just put it at 0, but -3 is also a gentle enough amount that it's not going to be a big deal. It'll just basically adds another level of control and lets you decide if you want that to stay open a little longer or stay closed. By default, it's at -3, so I'm just going to leave it there. The other stuff to note on here is the look ahead. That basically looks ahead a certain number of milliseconds to see what's coming and then react accordingly. I like it on a little bit, so you can mess with it and see what you like, but it feels to respond a little better and tighter when that's on. This area over here is basically what your sound is triggering off of. And so if you have no sidechain set, it is going to trigger off of itself, which is what you want. But this band pass or band reject, this will basically let you set an area that your gate listens to trigger. So if this is off and nothing's going on, it's going to trigger based on the full frequency spectrum, which is kind of a default of gates. If you want it to listen to a certain area, like the low end of the kick, and only trigger on the low end of the kick, you can do that here. So the benefit of setting up all your gain first is that now I know that my kick is peaking around -12 usually. And also, I probably want to put the gate before the compressor because the compressed sound is a little more evened out, where if we put it before the compressor, the peaks of the drums are going to be a little stronger. So it'll be easier to set the gate accordingly. So the benefit of this is we know that our peaks are around -12. So if we set our gate somewhere around -15, we're almost guaranteed to get all of our drum hits cutting through the gate. So I'm going to pull this reduction amount up and you'll hear kind of the background noise come back into the source. So I like my kick to be really clean, sometimes decrease the reduction on like the snare so you get some more of the ghosting back in there. You can increase the release to add some tail back onto your drum if it sounds too kind of shut off. So you can actually use that to control the response, kind of the resonance of your drum, if you want it tighter and short or a little longer and more natural sounding. Be careful with this though, because as you increase it, you're going to start to get other drum hits bleeding in. Okay, this bandpass area, I'm going to turn it on and turn the monitor on. The monitor on lets you hear what the gate is listening to. If it's off, you're going to hear the regular audio source. If it's on, you're going to hear whatever you've dialed in here. A bandpass means anything below these two frequencies is going to come through. The band reject, I believe anything below these frequencies is going to be rejected. Yep. So if you just want the gate to listen to the low end of the kick, for example, you could come down here and do something like this. And so now your gate is only going to trigger based on this low end information. I usually don't use this, but it's good to know what these controls are in case you want to dig in and dial in your sound a little more. Now that we've got our gate set right, we're going to move it to everything else. Copy it over with Option click drag. So now on the snare. So you want to find a balance here of setting the release so that your snare doesn't sound too isolated, too short, but you also want enough splash on the end of the snare. But as you add more splash, you're going to start to get hi-hat bleed and stuff like that introduced back in. So find the sweet spot where it has a little bit of a tail, but isn't letting in a ton of dirt, for lack of a better term. Bleed. And so you might be thinking that I've cut out all the ghosting, which I have, but I want to make sure my main snare hits, those big transients, are what's opening the gate, and then we can adjust the reduction to bring back in those ghost notes. It's also important to note that a lot of that detail and ghost notes is also coming through the overheads. It's still in there, so don't be freaked out that you're cutting out too much of the snare. It's still there. It's in the room mics if you have them. The important thing is just to get a good, clean smack, and then you can worry about the small details later. I do like that though. And we can always add more of a tail later with reverb. So I'm going to roll with that because it's a good tight sound. Next is the tom. I'm going to grab the kick gate again. So I'm going to pull this down. We're not getting all the hits. There we go. So this, it's hard to get a full picture until you added the gate to all the toms. So I'm going to add it real quick here. Make sure OBS is still going. We're still rolling. Okay. So it's coming through. It sounds terrible right now, but we're going to fix that. Like the first step is just getting the transients to come through. After that, you can dial it in to taste. We've got tom 1, 2, and 3 here. And we're going to tweak the releases until it sounds like toms. So tom 2 could use a little more. Floor tom could also use more. See, but we're getting that crash in the floor tom, so I'm actually going to keep that tight. Again, it sounds weird, but when you add the overheads back in, it feels a lot more natural. Okay, that about wraps up the gating. The benefit of this that I forgot to mention earlier is simply you don't have bleed in all your mics all the time. The mic is only open and producing sound when that drum is hit. So that's why we didn't put it on the overhead, because that's a full picture of the drums. We don't want to gate that out. But there's a lot of rumble, especially in the toms, like when your kick and snare is hit, it's vibrating the toms and just adding a bunch of noise that you don't necessarily want. So here's a big section with all the gates, and I'll disengage them, and you can see all the bleed that starts to come in down here on these meters. Here's no gates. Hear all that rumbling in the toms. Cut it out. So right there, we had some ride cymbal actually opening the gate of the tom. So we're going to need to increase that threshold so that that sound does not open the gate. There we go. Got it. Oh. Up this some more. Wow. It's quite the transient. So it's a balancing act, definitely, because you will have transients come through and open your gate sometimes. And you might even need to just cut out the audio region if there's a certain transient that's opening your gate when it's not supposed to. But that's a whole can of worms in an advanced topic. So just get some basic gating on your drums and you'll be, 90% of the way there.